Let's talk about all of this with David Buik. He's a markets commentator at Aquis Exchange. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Empress.
Thank you very much for joining us. Let's talk first of all about these latest GDP figures from the Office for National Statistics. Falling the economy, the value of the economy by 0.5% in July. Should we be worried?
Well, I think we should be disappointed. But one thing I think we need to think is the revision figures that we heard a couple of weeks ago. I don't think they're included in this lot. So maybe these figures will actually have to be revised again next month.
As they often are, aren't they? In many different directions. Are they not normally revised in sort of to look actually end up being better than we fear?
I think that's right. But I mean, they're not a great set of figures. But as you so rightly pointed out with your colleague as well, that we have got this situation where we had a shocking month in July. The weather was dreadful. Everybody was very much down on it. There was, the fear of inflation. People's hands never got to the bottom of their pockets. The shops were suffering to a certain degree, not hugely in the degree, but enough to produce these very, very disappointing figures. And I mean, over 3-month period, which is what I like to look at, because I think if you look at it just on a one-off, it's up 0.3%. It's not hallelujah time, but it's not that bad.
Right.
And I think
in terms of how bad it is compared with other comparable nations. Now, there is an element where when we make the comparisons between other European nations or America or other Western nations, often we're ignoring the fact that people came out of lockdowns at different paces, and we have different kinds of economies based on services or manufacturing issues. But we know Germany is in a terrible, terrible state. How are we faring compared with most of our European neighbours?
Well, I think some of the data that came out this morning quite surprised me, because this country, Julia, as you know, is known for its services. Minus 0.3% last month. Manufacturing, up 2.7%. Construction, up 2.8%. Now, the size of those economies in comparison to Germany are actually quite small, but that is a tremendous effort. And you have to say now, I also read in the papers this morning, that our level of manufacturing, we have leapfrogged over France. So again, we mustn't be too despondent, because some of these figures, I think you need to look at them over a prolonged period of time. And just to make an assessment after 1 month is probably not really sensible.
OK, that's really helpful to know. Well, one thing we do need to look at over a long period of time is our pensions. The earlier you start saving, the better things will be for your pension pot. But these sort of pension pots that we need to sustain what for many people could be, 30+ years in retirement are just basically way, way, way beyond the affordability for the vast majority of us. Now, Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride has warned that the pensions triple lock is unsustainable and said that it could be watered down. Now, bearing in mind, he's a minister who was chair of the Work and Pensions Select Committee of the Commons. He's been looking at this stuff for a long time. He knows his stuff. In terms of the triple lock, that was brought in, as a guarantee to pensioners who'd had some rotten pension payments over the years. But I still remember sitting in the House of Commons when Gordon Brown announced that 75 pence a week rise. I mean, absolute insults. And understandably, that was when voters, and as we know, older people more likely to vote, very unhappy about that. So ever since, well, not since then, but under David Cameron, we've seen a guarantee state pension will rise by either inflation, earnings, or a minimum of 2.5%. So whichever is highest, that's what you get. We could be looking at an increase of 10%. Well, it was 10% last year, of this 8.5% after yesterday's inflation figures, of wage inflation figures for next year. But there's even talk about that not happening next year. Is it sustainable to keep the triple lock?
Absolutely not. I'm quite surprised on a couple of things. First and foremost, about 3 weeks ago, Mel Stride was asked whether whether the Conservative Party in their manifesto would maintain the triple lock. And he said he thought yes. So this is quite a swing round. And I'm not surprised, because there's been an awful lot of commentary from what I call really sensible grown-up people like Lord William Hague, who said, it's just, you can't do it. And I'd just like to send out, this is my own personal message to the degree which nobody would be the slightest bit interested in, but I should be pushing up daisies before this happens. But if anybody, whether it's the public sector, is one of the reasons that people like working there, they do get wonderful pensions, the rest of it. But anybody on a pension period who thinks he's going to have the same benefits in 20 years' time that they get today, dream on, wake up and smell the coffee. We cannot afford it.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have more and more people living longer, and again, retirement age probably should have gone up a long time before. But also, we know a lot of people are not producing; they're not contributing for a lot of the time. With this long-term sick, latest report, 2.6 million people. So you've got more and more people in retirement age, fewer kids being born, fewer people in the working age population, and fewer of them working. I mean, the numbers don't add up. Do you think a lot of this is about not just the affordability for the country, but also intergenerational fairness? Because something like 1 in 4 pensioners are sitting on assets worth £1 million. Now, that may not be a realisable asset. They've got a house. You can't use your house to buy your groceries or pay your energy bill. I suppose you could remortgage your home. But when young people are struggling to pay rent, many of them never be able to afford to buy a home. They've got student debt. They've got stagnant pay. Childcare costs are astronomical. Do you think that it's actually intergenerationally unfair to keep looking after pensioners the way the triple lock does?
I think for a period of time, up until probably 10 years ago, the old age pension was so bad. And the fact is, I think they've done a lot to redress that. But one of the things we've noticed also is that, it's 65 retirement age, 66 now, and in 3 years' time, it's going to be 68. And I wouldn't be at all surprised in 5 years' time, it's going to be 70. And, you mentioned quite rightly 2.6 million people, either unwell, on the dole, not working. That costs. And the other thing, Julia, that if we were to pay, just say, the 8.5% in April of next year, that's £1 billion cost. That's just the increase. Yeah. So it just shows you the cost to the country of these pensions. Totally unsustainable. And what we need is from all political parties. I noticed that Angela Rayner staged Sturm yesterday. The fact is, they need to be honest. We cannot possibly afford them.
No. One thing we're not going to get from politicians is being honest. Well, we're going to be putting these questions to Shadow Health Secretary Labour's Wes Streeting up next, waiting for us live right now on College Green in Westminster. So, David Buik, big thanks to you. Thank you very much indeed. Before